All right. Hello, everybody. Hi, my name is William Thomas. I'm a leadership coach based in Singapore. I'm very glad that you're able to join this session today. I'm going to be hosting today's webinar on leading through uncertainty. Now, our session today is scheduled to go for 45 minutes. I've got about 35 minutes of material, leaving us some time for Q&A. Obviously, we're using Zoom as our platform, as you know, because you're on Zoom. This is still kind of a test for us. We've only been using this platform for a couple months, so hopefully it's all working out okay. We are recording this session, so it will be available for a replay later on our YouTube page. And just to make sure that the audio is working okay, I want to make sure you can hear me. Can I ask you to go ahead and type your city into the chat box? That way I know that you can hear me, and also it gives me an idea where you're from. So if you could just type your city name into the chat box there, then I'll know who we've got, and also I'll know that you can hear me. All right. Okay, so a lot of folks in today from the Philippines, and great. All right. Phil, I see that you're in Makati. I used to live in Makati myself, so I see quite a few of you there. Good to have you on board. And I did catch the note. Somebody asked if I could reduce the volume on the microphone. I just made some adjustments, and hopefully that's working a little bit better. All right. Well, I know we've got some folks here and also some folks watching, I believe, through our YouTube channel. So welcome to today's session. All right, so at the moment, just a little bit of housekeeping as we go through this. So I've got everybody muted at the moment, but if you have a question for me, down at the bottom of the participants list there, you can probably see a little hand raising gesture. If you have questions as we go through, go ahead and raise that, and I can bring you up on the microphone so you can ask a question. And of course, you can also just type them into the chat box, and I'll see them here. You can send your questions so that everybody can see them, or you can send them to me privately if you prefer. By the way, if you see a question come up in the chat box and you have some thoughts on it, I hope that you'll go ahead and share your thoughts. These sessions go a lot better when we get ideas from everybody, not just from me. So we do have folks from around Asia on the webinar, from a variety of industries. I know from our registration, we've got some bankers and some insurers based in Singapore. We have some university faculty and staff from Hong Kong. We've got a couple of American diplomats at embassies around the region. And we have a large contingent today from Global Business Power in the Philippines. So very happy to have you folks here. In fact, I read in the news just this month that your president, Mr. Azurin, was named one of the top 10 outstanding leaders in Asia at the Asia Corporate Excellence and Sustainability Awards. That's fantastic, and I think that serves as a reminder that even in these challenging times, in these uncertain times, great leadership is possible. In fact, the whole company's been honored for your investment in people. So again, I think that sets a tone for all of us that even when things are difficult, you can still do great work, and everybody else should be able to look to you and see that example. So thanks for joining us today. Our topic today, I think, seems pretty timely since we are facing a lot of uncertainty right now. The title of this program was actually inspired by my experiences at the North Pole a few years ago. I was up there in 2016 at the North Pole, and I was struck by how difficult it was to find your way around there. You don't have any geological features. There are no mountains up there. You can't look for where the sun is rising because when we were there, the sun was up for 24 hours a day. And at the North Pole, your compass just spins around and around. And that kind of uncertainty is very confusing. And if you don't know what direction to go, it's hard to get anywhere. So when you're trying to find your way, we often say that you should find your true north. You should find that key direction and figure it out from there. But, at the North Pole, that was very, very difficult to do. Now, our business environment today reminds me of that. Our environment is filled with a lot of uncertainty, with very few familiar landmarks. Now, this isn't entirely new. Many of us would say that uncertainty is a pretty common part of our business. But there are times when that uncertainty grows, such as during a reorganization, or through a merger or acquisition, or the introduction of new technologies or new processes, or, of course, a global pandemic. There are a lot of things we can learn in our current environment that are going to be helpful in many other situations. And so I think it's useful to find the lessons we can in this crisis and be ready to apply those lessons throughout our professional career. So where we're going to go today, our concept of leading through uncertainty really comes down to 3 key points, which are what we're going to be introducing in this session. The first is to be able to lead yourself. And before you can really be any good to anybody else, you first need to make sure that you have yourself in order. And we're going to look at what you can do to make your own life a little bit easier so that you can then turn around and lead others. The next thing we'll look at is how to lead your team, how to lead your employees. Now, when you're in a leadership role, obviously you're responsible for yourself, but of course you're responsible for other people, and you need to do what you can to maximize their performance. So we're going to look at a few things that will help you provide the clarity and the guidance that your team needs in order to do well. And lastly, we're going to take a look at leading your organization. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to be the CEO or the president or the head of a function. You can lead the organization regardless of your position, regardless of your seniority. And we'll talk about how to lead your company out of an uncertain period and back into something stable and hopefully profitable. Now, since you're investing your time today, I want to make sure you get something out of it. So just real quickly, here's the return on investment that I'm hoping that you're going to get. First, by the time we're done today, I want you to get an increase in your own self-confidence. Anytime you're in an uncertain situation, it's easy to get nervous, and that nervousness can slow you down. Instead, we'd like you to feel comfortable enough in your situation so that you can make decisions confidently. Now, once you have that comfort level for yourself, we expect that you'll be able to help others navigate through uncertainty and maximize their performance. Remember, as a leader, your biggest job isn't to create business value yourself so much as it is to help others create business value. Okay, you're like the coach on a sports team rather than one of the players out there scoring points. And once you feel comfortable with your own abilities, we want you to help others feel just as comfortable so they can focus on doing their jobs better. So that's the second thing we want you to take away, is that ability to help others navigate through uncertainty. And finally, we expect that you're going to be able to help your organization achieve its goals and move beyond uncertainty and back onto a clear path to success. We want to help you see how you can make that impact so you can put some attention to it, so you can put your focus where it's going to do the most good for the entire enterprise, not just for you and not just for your particular team. And like we said before you can lead others, before you can lead your business, you need to lead yourself. So let's take a look at that first. There are 3 key things that we want you to focus on right away. Things that if they aren't settled already, they need to be, okay? And if you haven't been able to address these in the last 6 months, then the time to do that is this afternoon, all right? First is the idea of giving yourself some clarity, understanding what's going on around you and what your role is now. Secondly is being really, really clear about what is expected of you, not just by yourself, but by others. And finally, if you're going to be working through a challenging situation, you need to make sure you're taking care of yourself. So we're going to talk a little bit about self-care as well. But first of all, let's get some clarity on what I mean by clarity, okay? When we talk about getting clarity, we're talking about trying to understand your situation as best as you can. What is it that's going on around you? So first of all, figure out what it is that you actually know. Okay, maybe ask yourself, what are some things that have not changed? Okay, try to identify the things that are still the same so that you don't worry about them anymore. You don't have to worry yourself about them. And then take a harder look at what has changed. What assumptions did you used to have that you cannot have anymore? What were the normal conditions you used to experience that are not the normal conditions anymore? Maybe there's a new technology that's been introduced. Maybe there are some changes in your customers or in your markets. Maybe you have changing relationships within your organization and new reporting arrangements or something like that. But whatever the changes are, ask yourself, do I understand what has changed? And do I understand the implications of those changes? And once you can clearly identify what is different, make sure that you understand the impact of that so that you can respond to it. Some things really are important and some changes aren't. And you need to figure that out so you know where to focus your attention. The next thing to figure out is what you don't know. Now, this is a real challenge for a lot of us. It's like we know what we know, but sometimes we don't know what we don't know. There may be background factors that are affecting you without you even realizing it. And if you don't recognize them, then it's difficult for you to overcome them. Let me give you an example. I used to do some work with a global luxury hotel chain. And a few years ago, some of their hotels in Europe and Africa were facing revenue drops, even though the economies of their own countries were doing generally pretty well. What the general managers realized was that many of their business travelers were from oil and gas companies, from the oil and gas industry. And during that time, oil prices had just collapsed. So as a result, the oil companies weren't doing as much traveling. They were cutting their travel costs. They weren't flying around to meetings. They weren't sending their executives around. And so for the hotels, instead of having these high-paying business guests that they were used to, they were relying more on tourists and leisure travel. And a lot of those people were paying lower rates or even using points to pay for their stays. So the hotel's revenue was dropping. It is important for you to figure out what else is going on out there that you might not immediately be aware of. So to help you do this, let me suggest that you identify some reputable news sources that you can use regularly to gather information. I'm not talking here about social media. I'm not talking about things people share with you on Facebook or pass to you in WeChat or WhatsApp or Viber. I'm talking about reading professional journalistic sources such as The Economist, The Wall Street Journal, the Nikkei Review, the Financial Times, Human Resources Magazine, Chief Learning Officer Magazine, whatever news sources you can find that provide factual information that is going to be checked with multiple sources, that has some editorial oversight. Okay, find real news to help you understand what else is going on out there. Because the whole idea behind this, the whole idea behind these points on this page are to understand how your world has changed. And to do that, you need reliable information. Now, with that in mind, it is important for you to understand how your expectations have changed or how they should change. You know, if the world is changing around you, what does that mean for you? So first, look at the job that you do and ask yourself, has it changed? Is my job description different now than it was when I started? For example, if you're introducing new technology or new processes into your company, ask yourself, what impact does that have on my job description? What impact does that have on how I do my job day to day? Is your job changing? And if so, how is it changing? And in particular, think about the targets and the goals and the objectives that you're aiming for. If the organization is changing its broader goals, that can have an impact on you and how you do your work day to day. During the pandemic, for example, some industries such as hotels and the food and beverage sector, they're likely to have reset their annual goals for the company. And so, for example, if Marriott changes goals, the annual revenue targets for all of Marriott, how does that affect the Marriott at Tang Plaza here in Singapore? How does that affect the Le Méridien Hotel in the Siloam area of Bangkok? What do they have to do differently? And what does that mean for each of the departments? How have their targets changed? If the destination that you're moving towards has changed, you need to know what that new destination is so you can adjust your path for getting there. And if you don't know what it is, then you need to start asking. Finally, the last point here is that you should think about how your boss's expectations of you may have changed. Your manager may need you to do things that you haven't normally done before. For example, you may have to conduct some retrenchment conversations. You may have to lay some people off, and hopefully you've never done that before. If you could prepare for that in advance, instead of just getting told that morning that you have to have retrenchment discussions that afternoon, that's going to help you out a lot. Okay, so talk with your manager and find out what they may be expecting of you. Find out what kind of tasks you may be on the hook for. What kinds of new roles are they expecting you to take on? Okay. You don't want to get taken by surprise. That doesn't do anybody any good. Now, we've talked here about a lot of things that you need to do. Do this, do that. I keep telling you, do this and do so many different things. There are a lot of questions you need to be asking, and you do need to ask those just for your own knowledge and for your own peace of mind. And it is natural during times of great uncertainty to get very nervous about what's going on and get very worried and do more work than you need to do because you're just not sure what to do. So in addition to getting some clarity about your role and your expectations and all the changes, I want you to be taking care of yourself. I want you to be practicing some self-care. So consider how you can help take care of yourself. Now, in a moment, I'm going to pause and see if you have any questions once we walk through the points on this slide, and you can start typing those in the chat box if you do have some. But what I want you to consider right here is that in order to lead others, you need to make sure that you are up to the challenge, not just physically, but also emotionally and mentally too. So one thing that is going to help you in any kind of weird, uncertain, unusual situation is to set some boundaries for your work. And what I mean by that is this. Now, we've noticed in the last few months that as people are working from home, their workday tends to get quite a bit longer, 15 to 20% longer in many cases. When you work from home, it's hard to stop working and transition into personal time because you're still in the same place. At least when you're working in the office, you get in the car, you get on the bus, you get on the MRT, and you go home, and there's that transition to personal time, but you don't really have that when you're working from home. So it becomes more challenging to transition to that personal time. The easiest boundary to try to set is to set a starting time and an ending time for work. And then commit yourself to not looking at email, to not doing work, not opening the laptop after that ending time. It's tough and it takes a little while to get used to it, but you can get used to it. Now, for this to work, it helps if you communicate that with others, with your team, with your peers, and certainly with your manager, so that they understand when you would be available. And you should probably explain to them how this is going to help you be better so that you can help them. The reality is that you need to get some cooperation from others in order to stay within your boundaries. Okay, but it is important to set those boundaries and try to stick to them. Now, when you're facing a challenging situation at work, it is easy to continue working at the expense of your own health. We say things like, well, I don't have time to go to the gym, but I'll go tomorrow, or I'll get back there next week when I'm not as busy. And before you know it, the gym is calling you to see if you're ever going to come back. And I know because, well, that happened to me. So, when you're dealing with difficult situations, honestly, folks, that's when you need to be at your best. That's when you need to be your sharpest. And we know from years of study that sleep, nutrition, exercise, all of these contribute to your mental capabilities. And why would you want to diminish your abilities at the time when you need them the most? So carve out some time in your schedule for some kind of exercise. Do your best to eat well. Try to set some strict bedtimes and stick to those. Now, a lot of us, when we're facing difficulties, very often we try to keep it to ourselves. We're afraid that we're going to look weak. We're afraid that others are going to look down on us if we admit to being nervous, if we admit to being stressed. Remember, though, that if you're facing a difficult, uncertain situation at work, so is everybody else. The more you are willing to open up about the challenges that you're facing, the more others will open up to you as well. And when that happens, you can find ways to work together to get through this difficulty. But you're never going to be able to do that unless you actually talk to each other. Sorry, the idea behind leading yourself is a simple one. Before you can take care of others, you have to take care of yourself. And we often will tell people, oh, just stop and take a deep breath and try to relax. But it's important to know what to do after you've taken that deep breath, okay? And so these are some ideas that I wanted to share with you to help clear things up in your own mind and make sure that you're physically and mentally prepared to work through the difficult situation so that you can calm down and lead others more effectively. So let me pause for just a second here and see if you have any questions. And I've got one that was sent to me here privately. It says, what do I do if nobody respects my boundaries? And that is a very difficult situation. First of all, that's one reason that you do need to speak openly with your colleagues and be open about the work you're trying to do and talk with them a little bit about how these boundaries are going to help you be more effective so you can help them more effectively. So have that conversation, okay? Don't be afraid to have that conversation. Another thing that I would suggest is set an out-of-office message. When you're going to turn off your email at night, have an out-of-office message that pops up. So if people are sending you messages after hours, you can say something like, you know, thank you for your note. I'm currently away from work, but I'll be back at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning or 8 o'clock tomorrow morning or whatever the time is. And if people question you about it later, then go ahead and let them know why you're doing that, okay? But be open, be assertive about what you're doing, okay? Let people know what those boundaries are. People definitely aren't going to respect those boundaries if they don't know what they are. They're more likely to respect those boundaries if they know why you're putting them in place, okay? So hopefully that helps a little bit, but it does require the cooperation of your peers and your colleagues and your team and your boss for those boundaries to work well. It's true. It's true. Okay. Let's see then. So now let's talk a bit about leading others. Now you have a team of folks, maybe it's one or two people, or maybe you're the CEO and you've got hundreds or thousands of people who are depending on you. Specifically for our purposes today, what I want to talk about is how to lead your direct reports. And hopefully, if you're doing that, then they'll take care of leading their direct reports. We're going to talk here about communicating openly with your team, about resetting some of their expectations, and how to take care of them a bit and make sure that they're just as emotionally and mentally and physically prepared for work as you are. Now, most of our discussion today is about this idea of open communication. So let's go ahead and start with that. The last thing you want, okay, the last thing you want is for your employees to sit around wondering what's going on. When people are not sure what is happening, then they don't know what they're supposed to do. And if they don't know what they're supposed to do, then they aren't doing it. So try to keep the flow of communication as open as you can. Now, I realize that in many places with a more hierarchical structure, it may be common for the bosses to keep information to themselves or to say, look, I told people what to do. I don't need to explain why they should do it. And I get that. I understand that. I spent 21 years as an officer in the United States military. And that's a place where the boss says do something and everyone else would go, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, and do it. That doesn't help in a situation like this, okay? Being more open with your information and communication is vital. So first of all, pass along whatever information you get to everybody else, whether it is a strategic decision about rebranding or news that somebody in the building has tested positive for coronavirus. I mean, whatever the important information is, if it's relevant, if it will be useful for your team, don't keep it to yourself. Your team would rather hear bad news from you than not hear it at all, because if they hear it from you, then at least they can move forward. But if they don't know what's happening, then they just sit around and wonder about it, or they spend their time talking to each other about it instead of actually working. Now, another kind of communication that I think is going to be very important with any kind of uncertainty is feedback. Now, we always encourage leaders to provide informal feedback instead of waiting for that annual formal performance review. That informal feedback becomes even more important now. When there are challenges facing the company, or when the nature of your team's work is changing, people need to know that they're on the right track. They need to know if they're doing the right thing. So you need to let them know when they are, and you need to correct them when they get off track. Or if they're still doing things the old way and you need them to do things a new way. You need to provide that feedback, whether it's reassurance that they're doing the right thing or corrective if they're doing the wrong thing. The last thing you want is for your employees to not do anything because they're not sure what the right thing is. If they don't feel confident that they're moving in the right direction, they will hesitate to make decisions, and that's not something that you need, okay? You need people to make decisions and keep moving. Now, as I said, I mentioned this a couple of times, you'll often have people sit around and talking about things, or texting in a WhatsApp group or a WeChat group, or sharing messages on Viber, or meeting up in the pantry if you're back in the office, as some of you are. And when that happens, rumors get started easily and they take on a life of their own. Folks, when you hear rumors, or when people come to you with questions about things that they've heard, try to follow up on those and determine if they're accurate or not. And then get that information back to everybody else. Okay, rumors and gossip will slow you down, and they will lead people to make bad decisions. And that doesn't help you at all. So open communication isn't just a one-way thing where you're passing information down. You should be doing that. And it's not just you giving feedback to people, but it's also you listening to what they're saying and helping to determine the accuracy of it and letting them know, yes, that's true, or no, that's not. Now, as much as we talk about communication, there's one kind that's going to be incredibly important, and this is the idea of resetting expectations for folks. Consider what it is you're expecting from your employees during this uncertain time, and also think about what they should be expecting of you. Think about things from their perspective as well. Now, if your organization's goals have changed, that can affect individual KPIs. We talked earlier about how it can affect your work. Remember, it affects your employees as well. So make sure they know what they're responsible for when it comes to achieving particular objectives, especially if those objectives have changed. And also let them know if you're going to shift responsibilities between different people, or if you're going to have to add responsibilities to somebody's job because of personnel changes. Maybe you've had retrenchments, or maybe there's been a reorganization. If somebody's going to need to take on new responsibilities, they need to know that. Okay, and you need to give them as much notice as you can. Consider how working styles need to change in order to meet the company's new requirements. And make sure your team is clear on what those new styles are. With something, for example, like corporate rebranding, okay, and I've been through this exercise myself in the past, the way that your client-facing employees are going to communicate with your customers may need to change. That style of communication that they do may need to change. Don't let them wonder about it, okay? Don't let them wonder what they're supposed to be doing, but instead, make that new working style clear to them. Make that new working expectation clear to them. In our current situation, with a lot of people working from home, that's clearly led to a lot of new expectations about how people are going to work. In Singapore, for example, where I am now, some people may be in the office and some people may be at home. And then they switch places. So maybe you spend 1 week in the office and then 1 week at home. That may lead to people taking on one set of responsibilities in the office and another set of responsibilities at home. And by the way, that keeps changing. I just saw earlier this morning that the Ministry of Manpower is going to change the rules on employees in the office in a couple of days. So as things change, you've got to keep people aware of what the working style expectations are. Consider too that you may be making changes, your company may be making changes in things like compensation and benefits during uncertain times. And that's going to add to the uncertainty. And you don't want your employees to be worried about that. That just takes time away from the work that they're doing. If they're sitting around, discussing with each other what's going to happen to salaries and bonuses and things like that, to the extent that you can, and I realize you may have some company sensitive information, but to the extent that you can, let people know about any expected changes, any proposed changes in things like compensation or bonuses or vacation policies or anything like that, and let them know why those changes are happening. For example, during the pandemic, some companies have gone from a 5-day work week to a 4-day work week, and they've cut pay by 20% so that they can avoid laying people off. They'd rather keep their entire workforce at lower salaries than have to cut some people in order to keep everyone at the same salary. If you're going to be cutting salaries, if you're going to be cutting hours, if you're going to be changing any of your personnel policies, try to let people know why you're doing that so that they can make informed decisions rather than sitting around wondering about it. If you keep stuff to yourself, you're going to get a lot of conspiracy theorists in the office, and a lot of rumors and gossip are going to flow, and that's going to become the conversation instead of the reality and the facts becoming the conversation. So communicating openly with your team is one really, really important way to help you take care of them. Now, in a moment, I'm going to want to pull up and see what questions you have about leading your team. So if you want to type those into the chat box now, by all means, go ahead. But the last point I want to make on this is to emphasize that while you're not mommy or daddy to your team, right, it is up to you to make sure that they're doing okay during a stressful period. And so I strongly urge you to really take care of your employees, take care of your direct reports. It's very important for you to check in with them regularly. I would encourage you to have individual calls with your direct reports just to see how they're doing and see what questions or concerns they might have. You can have group meetings, team meetings, where you're asking people how everyone's doing. But a lot of people hesitate to raise their concerns in a group. It's unfortunate, but it's true. And so it's important to have some individual check-ins. Now, these don't need to be long phone calls. They don't need to be every day. If you have a 15-minute call with each employee every couple of weeks, that can give you an idea of how they're doing and what kind of support they might need. It'll help you lead them better if you know what they need. It has the added benefit of letting them know that somebody is paying attention and somebody is watching out for them. And honestly, folks, that can make people feel a lot more confident about working through a difficult time. As I talked earlier about setting boundaries for yourself, I encourage you to help your employees start setting boundaries as well, especially around working hours. Consider how you can help them do this. As I said earlier, if you're trying to set boundaries, it's important for you to talk to your boss about that. Okay, now you're the boss. And your team may hesitate to come to you and say, this is what we want to do. Or they may not really know what kind of boundaries to set. Perhaps you could set some common policies across your team that would provide some consistency. Maybe you could do something about just something as simple as saying, we're not going to send emails after a certain time. A few years ago, Volkswagen, the car company, configured their servers so that email would only go out during a period from 30 minutes before the working day starts until 30 minutes after the working day ends. And emails would not go out on the weekends. So if anybody sent an email outside of that window, the email sat on the servers and wasn't delivered until 30 minutes before the working day started. Now, I'm not saying you need to go to that kind of extreme. What I am saying is that companies do this. It's okay to set boundaries. In fact, you should. And if you don't set boundaries for your team, they may hesitate to come to you with their own suggestions. They may be worried about their job. They may be worried about what's going to happen to them. They may not want to look pessimistic and defeatist. So they hesitate to talk to you. So you need to reach out and talk to them. Lastly, one of the things that we've seen over the last 6 months is an absolute explosion in online meetings. It's unbelievable to me how many meetings people have. One of my coaching clients works for a global tech company in San Francisco. And he shared with me one week his Outlook calendar. And I kid you not, from Monday through Friday between 9 to 6, it was almost all meetings. He was in meetings with people that that he usually would have been in the office with. He was in meetings with people down in South America. He was in meetings with people in Hawaii. It was crazy. The whole day was spent in meetings. And after 6 p.m., that was when he could start actually doing his own work, right? The work that he needed to be doing. And that's crazy, folks. But unfortunately, many of us have far more meetings now than we really need. And you need to step up and do something about that from your position as a leader. So figure out what issues truly require a meeting, okay? And try to reduce the amount of time spent in those meetings. Even though you set something up on Zoom and the default is 1 hour, you don't have to set a meeting for 1 hour, okay? It can be shorter than that. Send out an agenda in advance. It doesn't have to be formal, just a few lines saying this is what we're gonna work on, so that people can stay focused, so they can be prepared, and you can get more value out of those meetings so you don't have to have so many of them. I keep saying that communication is important, and it is, but over communication doesn't help anybody. So make sure your people have the time that they need in order to do the work that they have to do. Now, I got a couple questions that have come in, and let me pause here as we're talking about leading your team. Let me take these questions real quick. So there's a question here about communication, and it is, how would you suggest dealing with a coworker who is spreading rumors or sowing dissent? That is a challenge. That's always a challenge. And I think if this is one of your coworkers, like one of your peers, then you could respond to them by asking for the information behind that. Ask them what their source is. Basically ask them for the details. And when people are making up stuff or when they're just spreading rumors, when they keep getting asked for the source of it, they start to realize that that's awkward, that's embarrassing, because they don't have one, and nobody likes to be embarrassed. So over time, a lot of these folks will tend to stop, and they will tend to back off. If you're the manager and if it's your team that's doing it, what I would encourage you to do is, if you hear somebody coming to you with a rumor and they're advocating it, they're not asking you about it, but they're saying, well, this is what I heard, make them do the research. Tell them, okay, I need you to go digging on this. I need you to come back to me in a couple of hours with the information behind this. Again, a lot of times putting people on the spot and making them justify what they've said creates that degree of awkwardness and creates some accountability for them, and it will lead them to back off a bit. It will back off. They will tend to back off a bit, okay? So don't just accept those rumors, but instead force people to go back and try and explain them. Now, another question that I've got here, let's see, a question about sending emails after off hours. And someone suggests here, says that's somebody's choice if they choose to send emails off hours and there is no expectation anyway for folks to reply. That's great as long as there is no expectation for folks to reply. And again, I think that's something that could be discussed within the team. And that is a kind of boundary that you could set for your team. Maybe you don't want to set those timing boundaries. If people want to work until 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, that's great. If that works for them, then that is certainly up to them. But they need to understand that everybody else is not going to follow along with that, and not everybody else is checking their email at 9 o'clock and going to respond. So if you have that common understanding that there is no expectation that you're going to reply, I'm going to send this at 10 o'clock p.m. so that you'll see it first thing in the morning, then that's great. You do what you need to do. But what I'm going to suggest is that expectation needs to be created, and it needs to be discussed, and everybody needs to be aware of it, okay? It really needs to be cemented in everybody's mind. All right. Let's see. Over communication is situational in many cases. I would agree with that. But again, I think having some criteria for yourself about what requires a meeting and how to hold a meeting can allow you to cut down on the time spent in those meetings, all right, and give people the opportunity to do the work they need to do. If you're spending all your time in meetings, then you're not doing the work that you're going to report on in those meetings. Okay, that's kind of the main point there. So spend the time you need to spend, but get the value out of it. Make sure it's valuable time, useful time. There is, let's see, a last question here. It says the challenge about leading during uncertain times like today's is trust. Trust that our bosses are doing their best to fight for the interests of our team. How can we lead our teams and ensure that the wall of trust is not broken? I'm going to come back to open communication again. And I stress this because I think in normal times, we always tell leaders, oh, you need to communicate with your people and share information. That is 100 times more important right now. When people are going to be nervous, when they're going to be worried, and they're not just worried about work, they're worried about their own health. They're worried about whether they will still have a job. They're worried about their families. They're worried about their kids' education. So I think keeping that communication open, letting people know that they should be coming to you with questions, going to your team and asking them what questions they have, asking some very open-ended questions rather than just yes/no questions. Are you okay? But that's a yes/no question. Ask them what's going on in their life. Ask them what they're doing. When people feel like that communication is in fact open, that encourages that trust to remain strong and remain in place. So I'm a huge proponent of communication as a way of building and solidifying that trust. All right, well, what I'd like to do, let me go into the last portion here, which is all about leading your organization. Now, as I said, you don't have to be the president or managing director or head of a function to lead your organization, right? If you're facing uncertainty, then everybody in the organization needs to be looking for opportunities and looking for problems and keeping the lines of communication open throughout the organization, not just within a team. So first thing, look for opportunities, okay? And every uncertain situation can create problems, but it can also create opportunities for you. Consider the pandemic. Now here in Singapore, when the coronavirus was found to be spreading through our foreign worker dormitories, that created an opportunity for hotels to contract with either the government or with private employers to provide housing for those workers, get them out of crowded facilities and into private rooms until the virus could be controlled, which it finally has been here. So hotels were losing revenue because the borders were closed and there was no business or tourist travel, but there was a new opportunity for a new market that had not been addressed before. So look for opportunities to generate revenue and to help you meet your business goals. Be open to new partnerships and new relationships that could support your business. And often these might be with people outside of your business. Let me give you an example. I want to share with you the experience of a Philippine fashion designer named Aya Coca. Aya is in Cebu, and he has pivoted from creating bridal gowns and formal wear for galas and such to creating really nice masks. And they are really nice. And that is, there's right here, okay? That's an Aya Coca original. I've ordered them from the Philippines because they're so nice. But also I ordered them because Aya has an arrangement where for every mask he sells, he donates one to the primary school that he attended as a kid. Now that I think is awesome. It's great for the school and it's great for the community. And it's also great for Aya Coca's branding, okay, for the future. This is setting them up for some success now and in the future. It's setting up for success now because it encourages people to buy the masks, which is a revenue stream for him. It helps him in the future because, let's face it, corporate social responsibility is good for communities, and it's also good for companies by enhancing their brand. So he's found this partnership with the school that helps them and helps him. So if you can find a win-win situation with somebody else, go for it. And you've got to look for those opportunities. And of course, look for opportunities not just from your own brain, but from your employees. You need to be soliciting new ideas from your team. Be open to what they come up with. Now, a lot of leaders say that they want this, but their employees hesitate to speak up. So find a way to make it easier for your team to speak up and offer their inputs and offer their ideas. Maybe it's in those individual meetings. Maybe it's just by asking more open-ended questions and encouraging debate and discussion. Maybe it's creating some anonymous system where people can propose their ideas without risk that they're going to look dumb. Whatever it is, find a way to get your team to speak up and provide you those inputs. Because no matter, trust me, folks, no matter how smart you are, there are plenty of other smart people out there, and you want to take advantage of all of that. Also, of course, be on the lookout for problems. Watch out for what could go wrong. Earlier, I mentioned the example of hotels and oil prices. Make sure you understand your business well enough to know how it makes money and what could get in the way of making money. Try to stay abreast of the news, not just at home, but also in the markets where you do business, okay? If you're a multinational company and you've got clients in other countries, or you've got supply chains that are based in other countries, know what's going on there. The pandemic provides an interesting example of this because countries around Asia have all responded to it differently with different degrees of success. And some are still in lockdown and some are opening up, and everybody's different, and you need to know what's going on in those other markets to help you identify potential problems before they come up. And as you see problems coming up, don't be afraid to voice your concerns. As I've said a couple of times, a lot of people are afraid of looking pessimistic or defeatist or weak by raising problems. Don't worry about that. If you see a problem coming, raise it up, and ideally, raise it along with a proposed solution. It's always better to go to your boss with a solution than it is to just go to your boss with a problem. Those of you who are bosses understand that. I'm sure you appreciate that. So of course, once again, that gets us back to the idea of communication. You need to share your ideas and your concerns openly with your manager. You need to share up the chain of command, just like you're sharing with your own team and your own employees. You need to keep your relationships open across functions. And this isn't something you should be starting now, by the way. I mean, the first time you meet somebody shouldn't be when you're asking them for help, okay? You should be building networks and building relationships on a regular basis. I was watching a webinar the other day, and the president of Lazada in Vietnam made a great point. He said, you don't fix your roof when it's raining, okay? You're working on it all the time when the sun is shining. You should be building networks and relationships all the time. And also stay connected outside the organization, maybe to former colleagues who are working somewhere else, maybe trade associations or chambers of commerce, where people are describing what they're facing and what's going on in their markets and what they're experiencing. I'm not saying give away corporate secrets, but I am saying stay connected to others so that you get out of your bubble and see what else is going on in the world. Now, I know that we're covering a lot today, okay? I know we're covering a lot in a short period of time. And the idea behind this was just to introduce you to some techniques that you could then take away from here and build upon to build your own confidence and build your team's confidence and make everybody feel good about working forward. In a moment, I'm going to see what other questions you might have. But before I do that, with any session like this, it's very easy to be thinking of some ideas as we're sitting here. And then you leave this webinar and you go back to your inbox and you get into that and you forget all about this stuff. So let me suggest some action items that you might take quickly to get you started. And while I'm doing this, if you have questions, please go ahead and put those in the chat box. First thing I suggest you do, and I suggest you do it this afternoon. Put your phone away, sit down, take out a pen, or get your laptop open and start typing and make a list of what you know and what you don't know about your current situation. And that's probably changed over the last 6 months, okay? Whatever you knew in April is not what you know today. So figure out what you know and what you wish you knew about the current situation. And whatever the unknowns are, start trying to get some, then you can start trying to get some clarity on those. Figure out a method for scheduling your time. Figure out the boundaries you're gonna set. Okay, and the expectations you want to have about how you're going to work. All right. Try to take control of your time. Try to control your calendar without your calendar controlling you. And my colleague Jason is sitting across from me right now, and he's rolling his eyes at me because he knows I have trouble with this, and I need to work on this myself. And you're right, Jason. Thank you for that reminder. Try not to let your calendar control you. Talk with your team. Let your team know as much as you do. Whatever you have figured out, share it with them. And if they have questions, this is your opportunity to clear it up. If they have rumors that they've heard, this is your good chance to clear those up. Start talking with your employees individually. If you haven't done this in a while, or if you haven't done this yet, start having these calls today or tomorrow or next Monday, but check in with your team individually to see how they're doing and see what concerns and challenges they may have. And finally, set up a call, set up a chat with your own manager about where things are going and where the company is heading. If your organization's expectations are changing, this gives you a chance to realign your own expectations with the organization's needs. So these 5 points, these are 5 simple things you could go out and do to take these broader ideas from today and put them into practice very quickly. And I strongly urge you to do that. And by the way, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and this is going to be up on a replay. And if you want to come back and review this again, by all means, certainly do. That'll be on our YouTube channel, which you can find from our website, and our website is listed there. Our session today is really designed to help you find your direction, to find your true north and orient yourself and figure out which way you should go. This is a short session with a broad overview to what are some hopefully useful ideas that you can then take out and apply in your own particular situation. And if you think these work for you, then use them. And if you think there's something here that doesn't work for you, then don't use it. It's that simple. Now, if you're looking for something more in-depth, where we can get down into some details for your situation, if you're looking for some long-term assistance, of course, Designing Leaders provides individual leadership coaching, and we'd love to talk with you about that. If that's something that might be able to help you, we can figure out if that would be a good tool for you to make use of. We also provide workshops and seminars for your teams, giving people a chance to go more in-depth and address some of the real-world problems and come up with some real-world plans for the problems that they're dealing with through some group work. And we're able to do all of that virtually, of course. And we look forward to the day that we can travel out and see you all in person again. So our website is listed there, and Jason has put our link there in the chat box, so I hope that you'll go ahead and take a look at that as well. And with that, let's see if you have any other questions. Any other questions? I know we're about 5 minutes over our scheduled time. The reason I schedule these for 45 minutes is that very often with questions, they go a little bit longer. So let's see if you've got any other questions at this point. And if you do, just raise your hand and we can bring you up on the microphone or type them in the chat box. Let's see. Any questions? All right. All right. Well, it looks like we're good to go. And I appreciate the questions that we got earlier. Thank you very much. I'm simply at this point going to wish you all the best of luck. I know that we're in some challenging times right now. And I sincerely hope that everybody feels some degree of confidence going forward, that you feel like you can take on these difficult situations and keep moving forward to success. We're in a tough time right now. We're going to get through it. Just remind yourself, we've gotten through difficult situations before, and we're going to continue to get through them now and in the future as well. With that, like I said, if you have any follow-on questions, please do let us know. Please reach out to us through the website or respond to any of the emails that you've gotten from us. Those will come right back to me. Happy to take any follow-on questions. And I'm sorry, I do have one question that just came in. If you can stick with me, if you'll give me a moment, I'll address it. A question here asking, how do we deal with employees who do not want to return to the office when it's relatively safe? This is a challenge you're going to have. And I was talking with some of my coaching clients a few months ago, saying that if you don't have a return to work strategy yet, you need to be creating it. And now that some countries are opening up, we're at that point. I have folks in India who are back in the office. Here in Singapore, many of us are back in the office. In China, they're back in the office. But not everybody wants to come back. I think that companies are going to need to have a hybrid system for a while, because you are going to have employees who hesitate to come back because they're worried that it's not safe. And I think for now, you need to accept that. Bringing people back into an environment, forcing them into an environment where they do not feel safe, either because of the office or because of the public transit that it takes to get to the office, is going to create people who are very nervous and very worried, and that will distract them from their work. If you want them to be effective, then I encourage you to let people continue to work from home for now if they want to. You will find, and surveys in different countries are showing this, that a significant percentage of employees do want to get back to the office. And so many people will want to. But for those who don't want to, I would encourage you to keep a hybrid system in place where some people are working from home and some are working from the office. Also consider your liability, quite frankly. If you force somebody to come back into the office and then something happens and they get sick, I would not want to be, well, I would not want to be in that courtroom if I were you, okay? You do run into some potential liability problems. So I think that's something to keep in mind. And I know some companies have talked with me about that, about their concern about liability for doing in-person training again. They want to get back to a classroom, but they don't want their employees to sue them if they get sick. Same thing if you bring them back to the office. So yeah, I encourage a hybrid system for now until there's a good indication that things are getting back to normal, and that's not going to be until sometime next year. Okay, thanks, great question. All right, so at this point I am going to close it out because I know everybody needs to get back to work. So thank you very much for joining today. We run these sessions the last Thursday of every month. We solicit our topics from you, so if you have an idea for a topic, please let us know, and we're happy to take a look at those. Again, any questions, just please reach out to us. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much wherever you are. Have a great day ahead, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.